So yeah, it's a sad day for America, and you're right. The booking photograph from Atlanta, it's what I use as my Twitter photograph, and it's become iconic because Americans love an outlaw. But this is a case not of Jesse James. This is a case of political prosecutions. Let's look at the $500 million bail that has been demanded of him in the other trial in New York. For what? A fraud case in which there were no victims, no one was defrauded, and the amount, this historic amount, $430 million that has been demanded by this insane judge, happens to just be the same amount of cash President Trump has on hand for his campaign. So the right way to look at all of this is campaign interference. If we had a fair election today, the latest polling demonstrates it would be a complete trouncing of the incumbent Joe Biden. They're afraid that the American people will choose my former boss as the 47th president, and this is how they think they can stop him.
Now, I suppose those prosecuting this action will say that these are the courts of a country that are presumed to be free and fair. Yes, there might have been perhaps the reason these have gone after might be political, but these are legitimate cases. Perhaps you could prosecute a case like this against any businessman because people will have slipped up in the past and perhaps cut corners. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the courts have found the wrong answers.
Well, I'll just repeat what is the case with regards to Judge Engoron. There were no victims. There was no one defrauded. In fact, the banks that provided the loans to President Trump actually testified in court and said, we would like President Trump back as a client because he paid back early, he paid back with interest, and he's a great, great investment. So if the bank that the lunatic judge said was defrauded says, we weren't defrauded and we'd like him back as a client, you realize these are just show trials.
Well, Sebastian, do you believe any of the cases against Donald Trump are fair and legitimate?
No, they're insane. I mean, look at the one here in D.C. where I'm sitting. Judge Chutkan, that is prosecuting the president for so-called insurrection. We find out what? She was a colleague at the same law firm for 12 years in D.C. with none other than Hunter Biden. I mean, can you see a more explicit conflict of interest that you're the judge in a political case against the leader of the opposition and you were bosom buddies with the son of the current incumbent? It's farcical. It's like a Kafka novel.
It does seem a little bit like a stretch. I don't think that all of my former colleagues would necessarily mean that I'm bosom buddies with any. Anyway, let's get back to the point.
But you can't be a judge. No, hang on. You can't be a judge. I mean, it's very important in law. It's not just the probity of a case, the appearance of probity, right? If you were colleagues with the son of the man who this person can actually beat an election, you should recuse yourself. That's what we demand.
Now, let's get to this issue of the $450 million, £350 million, an enormous amount of money. There is some concern that if today does not go Trump's way, the bailiffs could be round and his property could be seized.
Yeah, so let's just dissect this for a moment. This never before in history, not with Al Capone, nobody, has been demanded to pay $500 million in bail money before they're allowed to appeal. Think about that. The judge is saying you're not allowed to appeal the first instance unless you deposit $430 billion in cash. If the president cannot do so or refuses to do so, the attorney general of the state of New York, who campaigned, because sadly she was elected, campaigned on putting President Trump in prison, she's going to start seizing his assets. Now think about this. A crime without any victims, therefore not a crime. Who gets the $400 million? She said the state of New York gets it because there are no victims. That is exactly the definition of communism. You take private property from an individual and you use the courts, you use the system to steal it for the state. That's communism we are witnessing, sadly, in the state of New York.
The state of New York might say in this instance that there was money owed to the state of New York, the lost interest on that. I believe that's how you get this enormous figure. So they might say that the people who've lost out here, perhaps no individual, but every New York taxpayer.
But lost interest on what? We're talking about private loans from private banks to the Trump organization. Loans that were paid back in time, in fact, often early, with full interest. Whose interest are we talking about? So, some mythical taxpayer in New York that had nothing to do with the original deal? It's fantasy. It's la-la land.
So, Sebastian, how do you see this playing out then for Donald Trump? He's doing pretty well in the polls. He could be the next president of the United States. How do you see this going today and in the run-up to the election?
Well, look, I don't do predictions because predictions are mug's game. Nobody gets challenged about what they said 6 months ago when they predicted something. But I'll look at a fact pattern. I'll look at a trend line. In the last 2 years, every single time something like this has been done to the president, whether it's the FBI with armed goons raiding his home at Mar-a-Lago, whether it's the Alvin Bragg indictment in New York, whether it's Engoron, whether it's Chutkan, whether it's any one of these, black-robed thugs, every time there's a new indictment, he gets more popular and he raises more money. I mean, this is the insanity of the Democrat Party. They're so driven and hostages to their own hatred and ideology. They're actually making him stronger than he's ever been before. It's like that last scene from Star Wars. If you strike me down, Darth, I will be more powerful than you can ever imagine. President Trump is stronger than if you look at the polls, he's got 26% of the black population, more than 45% of the Hispanic population. The trend line amongst the youth, which is kind of surprising, is going towards President Trump. And as a result, he would win an election today, but they can't stand it, so they want to put him in prison or worse.